Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarbil Dashgupta. I am a first semester MTech student at the Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur. I am from the Chemical Engineering department. So, this presentation of mine is mainly focused for the BTech students. Now, when I was in a BTech program, what I used to think that, I had a misconception that the application of chemical engineering is mainly based on industry. With the help of this small presentation, I'd like to show that the application of chemical engineering is not only in the industry but it can also be used in the medical field and many more. Okay, so let's proceed. Now, in order to show that, I will be talking about certain case studies. So, the first case study will be that of the pancreas. Now, in the figure shown in the right, we can see that the pancreas is situated in the abdomen region of our body. The pancreas is a glandular structure which performs mainly the endocrine functions and the exocrine functions. The endocrine function is basically secretion of hormones in our bloodstream, whereas the exocrine function is the secretion of digestive juices in the small intestine. Now, if a person is having a faulty pancreas, then the type of disease which generally he or she may suffer are diabetes mellitus, pancreatitis, pancreatic cancer, and many more. Now, why is it important to look at the pancreas from an engineer's point of view? It is because approximately 463 million adults are suffering from diabetes. Right, and this data is of the year of 2019, and it has been taken from International Diabetes Federation, which is a huge number. Now, what happens is if a person is suffering from type 2 diabetes, he or she is given medications. Now, we need to understand that if a person is suffering from type 1 diabetes, the medications won't really be working because the cells in the pancreas aren't really producing any insulin. And even if we do use insulin for those who are suffering from type 2 diabetes, it will work only at the previous stages. Now, in the case of a organ failure, medication won't be of much use because many functions will start failing simultaneously. And to top it all, the drugs also do have side effects like low blood sugar, upset stomach, kidney complications, and many more. So, what should we do in the case of organ failure? Well, the answer is going for an organ transplantation. But it is not easy. To be honest, it is very, very difficult. Going for an organ transplantation is very difficult. Now, it is difficult because of the various things which we need to keep in our mind while going for organ transplantation. The donor may die because if we are transplanting organs like the heart or the trachea or these kind of organs, then the donor will definitely die. Now, when the organ is being transplanted, the organ needs to be healthy so that the patient's body can accept accept the organ. And many a times what happens is the donor and the patient may be at a very long distance. So the organ needs to be carried. And in order to do so, we need to store the organ in such a manner so that it does not, so that it is still in its prime, so that it does not degrades. And finally, the organ needs to be compatible with the patient's body. Now, this is how pancreas is seen by the eyes of doctors and biologists. And this is pancreas as seen by the eyes of a chemical engineer. Now, in our BTech, you will see that we do have a subject known as process control. So, what we generally do in process control, like I'm not too sure whether you have covered the subject or not. So I will also define a little bit of process control. So what we do in process control is basically we are controlling a chemical system by varying parameters, and that we do by having various kind of control strategies. So the thing which I am showing over here, it is a sensor actuated pump. So pancreas, from the perspective of a chemical engineer, is basically the sensor and the pump working together. So what really happening is our bloodstream contains glucose. So the sensor senses the amount of glucose present in our bloodstream, and based on that, it will send the signal to the pump, and the pump will pump insulin inside our bloodstream. So if we are having low glucose level, then the amount of insulin pumped in the bloodstream will be lesser. If you are having high glucose level in our blood, then the amount will be more. So this is also known as a feedback control loop, because we are getting the feedback from the bloodstream, and based on that we are pumping insulin. And the same concept about the feedback control system is used as an engineering solution to tackle diabetes, also known as the insulin pump. So let me explain a little bit about this insulin pump. It is having a glucose sensor where I am pointing the cursor. So with the help of the glucose sensor, it is able to sense the amount of glucose present in our bloodstream, and from the sensor, it is sending the data to the insulin pump. So the insulin pump is basically an external pump having insulin reservoir inside it. So the pump will pump the insulin directly in our bloodstream with the help of infusion set. So the infusion set is basically a pipe which is connecting the pump to our body. Now we need to understand that when we are when we're going for medicines, we are actually having insulin and also other chemical composition. But when we are using the insulin pump, we are directly pumping the insulin. So insulin pump is better compared to medicine. The effectiveness of insulin pump is better because over here we're directly pumping the insulin. And another thing, those person who are suffering from type 1 diabetes, the insulin pump is a necessity because they really don't have any other options. Now we move on to our second case study, the heart. Now, why is it important to study the heart? Well, it is because, according to World Health Organization, in the year of 2020, 17.9 million people's deaths were due to cardiovascular diseases. So that's really a pretty huge number. Now, the heart, from an engineering point of view, can be viewed as a masterpiece because it is a pump which is having four separate compartments, and it is designed in such a manner that the mixing of the oxygenated blood with the deoxygenated blood does not occur, and also the presence of tricuspid and bicuspid valves so that the backflow of blood does not occur. So it's truly amazing. And now over here I have shown how the blood flow is occurring throughout our body, and the capillaries also shows the mechanism of absorption and diffusion. So because of that, the capillaries are able to exchange the nutrients and oxygen and carbon dioxide. The blood vessels of the human body is very much different from the normal pipes which we generally see. And that is because in the case of pipes, they are unable to vary their diameters. Whereas in the case of the human body, the arteries, arterioles, capillaries, these are all having a layer of smooth muscle. So what this smooth muscle does is it when it contracts, the diameter decreases, and this phenomenon is known as constriction. And when the smooth muscle relax, the diameter expands, and the phenomenon is known as dilation. Now the Hagen-Poiseuille equation, which all of us chemical engineers know very well, is very much applicable for blood flow. So what really happens is, for a constant pressure drop, the flow rate is directly proportional to the fourth power of the diameter. Now, for example, let's say someone is running. Suddenly, someone has an emergency. He or she is running. So, more blood flow will be needed in his leg region, for the muscles in his leg region. So, what will happen is the arteries which are moving towards the leg, those will the diameter will increase. A dilation will take place, and in order to compensate, the arteries present in the abdomen region, those will constrict. So like this, our human body is able to regulate blood flow. And now what happens in the case of atherosclerosis is this: the accumulation of cholesterol and fats occur in the arteries, which is actually reducing the blood flow because the resistance is building up. And in the case of arteriosclerosis, the same thing occurs, but it is a degenerative process where the arteries is again becoming thick and stiff, which is restricting the blood flow. So now uh, what we have to do is to remove these diseased arteries. the best possible method is going for a natural substitution. In the human body, there is mammary arteries. So what the surgeon does is he takes the mammary arteries and he removes out the diseased arteries, which is basically known as a bypass surgery. Now, what really happens if is, let's say someone is having more than one diseased arteries or arterioles. In those cases, just the mammary artery won't be enough. So in those cases, what the surgeon does is he takes the saphenous vein from our leg and he cuts it into very smaller region, and then he takes those saphenous vein and substitute it with the diseased arteries. But we need to understand that it is a vein, so its morphology is very much different from that of an artery. So anyway, with time, the veins becomes diseased. So now what should we do? We go for the usage of synthetic materials. Now, these synthetic materials are known as stent. So what do they do? So they are basically pipes which we attach in instead of the infected arteries or arterioles. But we need to understand that these are synthetic materials which are not of biological origin. So when the blood will be flowing through them, they will see foreign bodies, and due to that, formation of blood clot will take place. Like in this diagram, I've tried to show the formation of blood clot. Now, if the size of the artery is quite big, so if the size is big, then it won't be of much problem because the lumen will still be able to make blood flow. However, when we are talking about coronary arteries whose diameter is in the range of 0.5 millimeter to 1 millimeter, in those cases, if the formation of blood clot takes place, then the entire flow will stop. So we cannot use synthetic materials in those cases. So what can we do? Another thing which we can actually do is take the synthetic material and we cover the entire surface of the synthetic material with cells. So when that will happen, when the blood will be flowing now, it will be unable to recognize whether it is a synthetic material or whether it is its own body, because it has been covered with the endothelial cells, and it will see that the blood will only see these cells. Now this technique, due to the usage of the synthetic material, it will provide the mechanical strength, and due to the growing of the endothelial cells across the periphery of the synthetic material, it will make it totally biologically compatible. Now any guess from whose mind this idea came? The idea came from the mind of a chemical engineer known as Robert Langer. So basically, in simple word, what tissue engineering means is the usage of scaffolds. Now, scaffolds are basically synthetic material which which we design in such a manner that it becomes biologically compatible. It is having sufficient mechanical strength, and it is able to support cellular activities. The cells of the and the cells are taken from the infected person's body, so that the the organ which will be produced or the tissue which will be produced will be totally compatible with the patient's body. And the biomaterials are generally the nutrients or the growth factors and all those things. So Mr. Langer, he used these techniques, and he was able to create artificial arteries. And not only that, like with the help of tissue engineering, even organs can be created. Now the advantages of tissue engineering are really huge, because the organs or tissues which are made from tissue engineering are made with the cells of the patient's body itself. So there are no question of non-biocompatible. So these will be highly compatible with the patient's body. Like in the case for the faulty pancreas, which I was talking about. So there I mentioned something about organ failure. However, like if we are doing organ transplantation from a different donor's body, there were so many restrictions which I have already talked about. But in the case of tissue engineering, all those restrictions go away, because in the case of tissue engineering, we're designing the organ from the body of the we're designing the organ in such a manner that the organ will be highly biologically compatible with the patient's body. So The applications of tissue engineering are basically the improving of the damaged tissue, restoring the damaged tissues, and formation of organs. Now the truth is, I wanted to talk about even more applications of chemical engineering in the medical field, but time is a constraint, so I will be ending my seminar over here. But at least by now, we do have an idea that chemical engineering is not restricted only in the industry. It is having a very wide range of applications. So thank you very much. And these are the references. Thank you.